Hi guys, what's up? This is Insanity. Got a gameplay of World War II on PS4. Naturally, with Infinity War having came out and me watching it recently, I do a commentary on that movie. Firstly, I want to mention that I actually went into the movie spoiled on a number of plot points and surprises. This is a double-edged sword. The plus is that I avoid shiny new toy syndrome when I watch a new Marvel Cinematic Universe movie, and I can really focus on giving the most fair, objective thoughts possible, even if I might still be softer on any potential critiques. The negative is that it means that certain story beats don't hit as hard as they would have if I went in without any prior knowledge. The last time I did this was with Civil War, where I watched a full bootleg of the movie prior to watching a movie in theaters, and honestly, the closing scenes of the movie stunned me both times I watched it, because it lessened my engagement with Civil War the several minutes an hour before that. Though with Infinity War, I think that overall it's a 9 out of 10 movie. It's absolutely the ultimate fan service movie. There's lots of awesome spectacle and in-character interactions and plenty of well-executed comedy. But the one thing that makes the movie is Thanos, the villain. After being the butt of "I sit in a space chair all day and lose Infinity Stones" jokes for so long, this movie absolutely had to deliver on Thanos, and if it didn't, that would retroactively have made his cameos and previous appearances completely pointless. If you have even an inkling of familiarity with the comic stories that Infinity War was adapted from, it's obvious that Thanos was going to win. I'm not a comic reader, and I was spoiled before watching Infinity War, so my concentration on Thanos had more to do with how he's presented, in terms of characterization, screen presence, and menace. I'm pleased to say that even knowing Thanos would win going into the movie, I found to be outstanding. In interviews, the production staff said that Infinity War was intended to be Thanos' movie, and it shows. All the heroic characters are either reacting to or actively going after Thanos, while Thanos undergoes his own personal journey and we get scenes to flesh out his character. There are multiple plots going on in Infinity War, but the story is very simple to follow, thanks to Thanos being the glue that holds all of the plots together. I liked how we get some insight into Thanos' character, the actor's performance rendering Thanos as someone who is fairly human despite being an alien CGI character, and whenever Thanos was on screen, you really felt how his presence affects the surroundings. Characters take him seriously, and he has lots of interesting interactions with various heroes. The beginning of the movie really set the tone going forward, and Thanos truly makes it clear just what kind of character and villain he will be within those first couple of minutes. Marvel has always been cited as having a villain problem. Vulture and Homecoming is probably the first time they've really tried. Killmonger and Black Panther was where they tackled it head on, and now Thanos in Infinity War shows that if they really put their minds to it, they could make a very strong villain. Of course, Thanos is technically cheating since he's had multiple teases and cameo appearances, whereas the other villains in the Marvel Cinematic Universe only had one chance to make a strong first impression. But Thanos being a mission statement from Marvel that we absolutely intend to deliver on him as a villain is probably a bold one, after having been accused of delivering poor villains for so long. Thanos being a very strong villain really helps Infinity War be more than mere spectacle and comedy. There's a whole laundry list of characters in the movie, and it's clear that most of them are in the movie for action and comedy purposes, rather than having any meaningful plot contributions of their own, or even much dialogue in the case of a couple characters. There are a few oddities and nitpicks of the movie, with things such as characters appearing out of nowhere without a hint as to how they actually get there, characters you think should be there but are not for whatever reason, characters exiting at a moment's notice and no hint as to whether they're still there, especially after that ending, and at least 3 different "you have to do this," "I can't," "but you must, I know you can" moments in the movie. It's easier to forgive when Thanos is very well realized, and a lot of the action and character interaction, which is what you want to watch an Avengers movie for, is amazing. It was a smart idea to split the characters into various groupings, as the movie constantly shifts perspectives, but all their plots are still connected by Thanos, and eventually converge near their end. There's no extra threads that feel like a waste of time, or feel like ideas that should be part of a different movie, and more importantly, the plot is still moving forward despite the perspective shifts and does not slow down. It's a really tight script that manages to utilize a large cast in a way that While some characters inevitably get shortchanged, they all still have a moment to shine. All the actors bring their A game, with the exception of a few who are constrained mostly by lack of material than getting a sense that they were phoning it in. Apart from Thanos, Tony and Strange are two of my favorites from Infinity War. Seeing them clash on screen in terms of their ego and work ethic is great, and Strange's representation in Infinity War is as such that I can no longer call him Magic Iron Man. He takes his duties way more seriously than Tony, and doesn't take any bullshit from anyone, whereas Tony still snarks and uses sarcasm to cope with unpleasant situations. Also, with Peter on top of Tony in his movie, the pop culture references are pretty much their wheelhouse, so Strange doesn't do the same like he did in his origin movie. That leaves him to play off as a serious foil to Star-Lord, Spider-Man, and Iron Man. Then there's his display of sorcery, which received one hell of an upgrade in Infinity War. The battle on Titan against Thanos had Doctor Strange absolutely stealing the show there. If you didn't like Doctor Strange before, Infinity War may change your mind on that. And as always, Robert Downey Jr. never disappoints as Tony, who gets even more interesting aspects to his character in Infinity War, fighting alongside Peter as his protege, clashing egos of Strange and Star-Lord, and actively confronting and facing his fears when Thanos comes into the picture. While Avengers 1 made him significant since he was the most popular character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe then, and Avengers 2 was essentially Tony Stark's show where he created a villain and now had to fix his mistakes, Avengers 3, along with Civil War, really nailed making Tony Stark interesting and significant outside of popularity reasons. Tony's bleeding edge armor is the best suit he has yet in terms of action capabilities, and it was a neat callback to Civil War when Tony is now the one trying to cool off someone's head after he was subject to that in Civil War from Captain America. I'm a little bummed that, speaking of Cap, he didn't get much ado other than have a badass entrance and join forces with Black Panther and Wakanda, but I appreciated what I did see of him, and Chris Evans' facial expressions during the ending really helped sell just how devastating the situation was. The scene of him telling off Thunderbolt Ross at the Avengers compound was absolute quintessential Captain America. I like Thor in Ragnarok, and Infinity War's Thor is essentially an extension of that, but with a more serious and emotionally vulnerable Thor. And while he had a decent amount of screen time and a good subplot of him going after a new weapon to fight Thanos with while bonding a rocket, it's a bit unfortunate that Tony and Strange were in this movie because I think I would have found Thor to be one of my favorites too. He finally got to be in an Avengers movie that actually treats him very well, as opposed to being somewhat of an afterthought. One thing almost everyone can agree with is that Thor's entrance into Wakanda was badass, and nearly every camera-recorded video I've seen of it online had immense crowd applause. My audience was one of the more, shall I say, dead ones, unfortunately, and they only reacted strongly to Cap's entrance. So Thanos, Tony, and Strange, with maybe Thor, are my favorite characters in Infinity War, with an honorable mention to Ebony Maw, who's the first member of the Black Order or Children of Thanos to die and get punked badly, but he had an interesting presentation and powers, and I wish there was more of Ebony Maw, but alas. In short, Infinity War is a great movie that has a very strong villain, with strong performances, and plenty of amazing spectacle and comedy. How much you get out of Infinity War depends on whether you were invested in the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a whole. It's not the season finale it was marketed as when Avengers 4 is next year, so it'll be interesting to see how the current MCU wraps up then. As Thanos is still going to be the villain, I hope Avengers 4 doesn't retroactively ruin Infinity War once I see it. That's the gameplay and commentary. Hope you enjoyed it, and Insanity is out.
Adios, amigo. Rest in peace.